Hello, I'm Chris Dennis. I'm a KMP developer. And today we're going to be continuing our journey on how to program from the ground up. Oh, yeah, I got an update on the portal. Turns out the guy wasn't out sick. He was at an offsite and they're doing a reorg. So they're going to do the reorg the whole company, and they told me that by next Tuesday they should have figured out and have somebody out here to close it up. So hoping that reorg goes well and we'll get that portal closed up. Okay, so we're closing up to the section on class-oriented programming. It's been a slog through this stuff. There's a lot of things to cover because it's just been a mess. So let's listen to a little lecture by our friend Kevlin, Henney, about object. You keep using that word. No. Before that one, I want to do naming things. I want to talk about naming things. Before we get into more design, so let's get right down to some concrete brass tacks with code aesthetic. This guy's great. He's definitely an experienced developer, but I have some slightly different opinions, and he's talking about design documents and these coding standards. These are all debatable stuff, and you definitely should keep track of one as you go along about things you like and don't like. Everyone's gonna have a different style. I have my own document, just because after a while it's just better to keep track of what you like and don't like. And if you're working for a company, what they like and don't like, and they should have a document. If they don't, use yours. If they don't have one, you can just kind of hey, I got one here. I've already been working on for a while, so you don't have to adjust to everybody else's. You can use yours, but that's rare. All right, let's get into it. Why is that not playing?
The classic quote is, "There are only two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation and naming things."
There's actually three. And the last one is off by one errors because we start counting at zero. Get it? Off. There's three. Never mind.
I do agree that these are hard to get right, but they're also easy to get wrong. And we can get 80% of the way by avoiding bad patterns.
Yeah, 80 IQ points is how you set the problem up. That's Alan K.
We're going to talk about what I consider to be bad naming practices. Practices that if you avoid, you'll force yourself into better naming. The classic first example you'll see is you shouldn't name variables with a single letter. I suspect this originally came from when math and computer science were more or less the same.
Yeah, the Fortran people. Well, no, it wasn't math and computer. No, that wasn't it. We were limited on RAM. So you didn't have that many slots available anyway. So instead of having 2 or 3 characters, which would encourage you to do more slots and more variables, they didn't have that much space. So that was one thing. So limited your programs. And also it was mostly math people. They were programming these things in the beginning. So a lot of the habits came from them, and they know these aren't just letters to them, right? These actually mean something in math. When a mathematician looks at these, it just isn't a random set of numbers. These have meaning, and the symbolic meaning is totally lost on people unless you're into math.
Mathematicians pride themselves on being terse. They like to crystallize down to the smallest, most concise way of expression. The thing is, you don't need to edit math, but you do need to edit code. So it's become obvious to programmers that we should avoid using single-letter variable names because they don't tell you anything about the variable.
Except that you could probably ignore it, or it's just used as an index, just temporarily in that tiny little scope of the for loop, or that tiny little loop there that says, you can ignore me. If it's one character, that's what it means now. I'm just a placeholder. I'm just used as a counter or an index. It's not important what I am. So I'm just a placeholder. You can ignore me. So that's how it's being used now, because that's how it's being used.
But I'd argue that you should take this one step further. You should never abbreviate names, period.
I agree.
Look at this code. Can you tell me its purpose?
No. So a lot of beginner programmers, because they're not really used to typing yet, they think they're going to save a little time by actually doing the acronyms or whatever. And you do while you're writing it, but the moment you go back to read it, it's going to be a little harder. I mean, if you're sitting down, your short-term memory is going to have 7 items ±3 available at any time. 7 ± 2. So yeah, while you're sitting down doing, but if you came back to this in a week, it's going to be a little harder. Came back in 2 weeks, it's going to be a lot harder. And if you come back in 6 months, you're starting from zero. So isn't that nice?
What about now?
Right. This is much easier. Now we know we're talking about the genre, the year, the director, and some kind of weighting thing. So this must be some sort of search mechanism.
Abbreviations rely on context that you may or may not have. You spend more time reading code than writing code. So forcing yourself
about 10 times as much. And not just you, anyone else. If you're already by yourself, it's fine. I mean, you can just do that abbreviation stuff, and definitely should if you're just thinking with something. You don't really need to name it properly. You're just trying something out. But if anybody else is going to see it, you have to. Come on now. You have to put it up there. Don't make them come ask. Please don't make them come ask. Make it easy on them so we can ask about other stuff that's more important than the name of the variable.
To understand per system naming patterns makes it much harder to dig into unfamiliar code. Abbreviations used to help because of 2 reasons. It saved detyping, and screens were 80 characters wide. But now, when we write code, we get this. It takes less keyboard strokes than ever to write variable names.
Right, so you're not going to save time on just because it's shorter. The auto correct, all the stuff is this is why we long names. We can read it like it's prose, because we're not making it for the computer. We're making it for us and other people, mostly for other people, and maybe us in the future. But everybody says that. But don't worry about it. Don't be so selfish. Come on, this is see how it's a human activity. This is humans communicating with other humans. If you're just by yourself, who cares? But if you're with other people, you have to make it easy on them. They're going to try and make it easy on you. If we get on that same wavelength, it's okay. We're not trying to overcomplicate things. We're trying to make it easier.
And we have massive 4K screens now, so there's no real advantage to abbreviation. Don't put types in your name. If you've edited older code on Windows...
I like to do this sometimes. Like strings and raw integers. I like to kind of put what it's kind of being used for. And I like to do it if it's in. I like to do it sometimes. There are places where I do put the type at the end when it clarifies what's going on. If I've got multiple types of different things moving around, I definitely put the type in it. Yes. So I disagree. So I've got a little bit of the Polish notation, what they call the Polish notation style, or no, Hungarian. That's right, Hungarian notation where you put the type at the end. It's a little bit left over for my C days, but it does help you when you're reading. You don't have to go look at the type or hover over it. You can just look at the type at the end. There's certain sections of my code where I want the type there because it's going to make it easier to see what's going on.
Windows, you'll see something called Hungarian notation.
Yeah.
This is where you prefix the type to the variable.
I suffix it. Don't prefix it. I don't put the prefix at the end. I put the suffix.
Name. I think this goes back to before we had good standard types in C. So
yes, that's exactly why. Because we could pass anything around. There was no type checking, so you just pass around this thing, and you could accidentally pass it, pass it to a function that was expecting a boolean. You pass it in 32, or I mean that probably wouldn't be a problem. But if you pass the bool to in 32, that would probably be a problem.
Everything would basically be an int, and the type of the variable.
Yeah. It's basically it just passes address around. It doesn't really know exactly what you're doing.
It wouldn't actually tell you what was inside of it. But now with statically typed languages, the type should tell you exactly what you're looking at. So
right. With you hovering over it, but I want to just read it. I don't want to hover.
Putting types in your variables is no longer necessary.
Not necessary, but there's cases I like it.
It's considered good practice to put units.
And units, yes, definitely units, raw units. If you just have an integer, give me a raw unit as in the variable. That helps tremendously. Like time, days is it days, minutes, weeks, milliseconds, nanoseconds. That's super helpful.
Units in your variable names. For example, if you have a function that accepts a delay time, if this value is in seconds, you should name the variable delay seconds. This way, it's clear to the user of the function that they better be putting in seconds.
Because the first thing you're going to go is like, okay, why is this taking too long? Oh, it's seconds, not milliseconds, so it's 4,000 seconds. Oh, it's never going to come back.
It's also more clear to someone editing the class itself what unit they're working with. But even better than that is to have a type that removes the ambiguity completely.
Kotlin started doing this, but with the code bases that don't have it, or you're not allowed to put that in there. Okay, well, Given the thing on the end is just one way of doing it, you know?
For example, in C#, the time
It makes it easy to read it, too.
span, or chrono duration in C++.
Like, there's no, now I have to go look and see what the type is. I have to hover over those things. Oh, it's a time span. Okay, but
Type abstracts the user from understanding the exact underlying unit. You need to explicitly ask for a unit back. Like here, getting seconds back.
okay, that's cool, but that's new.
For dynamically typed languages like Python, you sadly can't rely on type declarations to help. So we'll need a bit of help from the variable name. Interestingly,
Right.
people also add types to their types. In C#, there's this pattern of prefixing interfaces with I.
Yeah, now I started doing this because it makes it super obvious in a context where I just want to have a testing version of it. I just want to have, I don't want to have any other interface except to have it so I can do a testing implementation and the regular implementation. So that's why, this is the reason I would use that, is to say, hey, this isn't a special thing. This is only for this testing thing. I'm not trying to make an abstract class or anything like that. This is why I would use this. But other than that, I don't know if it's, it doesn't really help. It does let you know immediately that this is allowing a type. It's using it as a type, not as a something else. So I do like it for that. So I don't have to go hover over it, know it's an interface. But some people get really irritated about this. I like it because I don't have to look it up. Anything I can just look at and not have to know is helpful.
This is something I've never understood. Good code uses
He doesn't understand because he doesn't understand. It's like, I just want to look at this. There's a reason why I can't implement an interface. I mean, I can't create an instance of an interface. But if this has an I on the front, I'm like, oh, this is an interface. I don't have to. When you have lots of different types, it gets confusing. So having this kind of configuration, I like it.
interfaces all the time. And the consumer doesn't really care whether it's an interface.
Well, if you're not allowed to make an instance of it, if you're trying to make an instance of this I thing, it's gonna be okay. Why are you trying to make it? It's gonna become obvious. Like, don't do that. This is just for making the code easier to read first time through without looking it up.
Class or abstract class. They just want to know what they can call. In this code, we animate an object on the screen. This is an interface. If I swap this to an abstract class or a concrete class, it wouldn't change this code, nor would it help the code do anything better.
True. In this case, it's true. So maybe it doesn't make a difference here. But in other cases, it's not so true.
C# is still following this pattern, even for new .NET library code. So for your C# code, it might make sense just to follow the pattern, since bad style guidelines are better than no style guidelines. For other languages, I definitely avoid.
I'll disagree.
Another example of typing their types is if you find yourself naming a class with base or abstract. This I've never found in a standard library. If I have a truck class, and then realize it might make sense to create a parent class instead, I've seen folks name the new parent class base truck. This isn't a great...
I thought this is really well done. I'm going to go back and rewind this because he's actually explaining this super well.
Or abstract. This I've never found in a standard library. If I have a truck class, and then realize it might make sense to create a parent class instead, I've seen folks name the new parent class base truck. This isn't a great name because it doesn't help the users of the class. It still represents a truck. If you ever find yourself unable to come up with a good name for the parent class, it probably means that we should actually rename the child class instead. Instead of base truck, let's just name it truck. And for the child class, let's over-specify the name. We'll call it trailer truck.
It's called this is the over specification way of thinking through it. I thought it was super clever. You're not generalizing, you're over specifying. Now you have a specific and now a very specific, a very, very, very specific, and a very, 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 very specific. Get crazy, but this is actually kind of an extendable method that kind of makes sense, especially even in boop contests.
Now, if someone gets a truck, they understand what they're getting. It's a truck, and they don't need to know about any of the details of subclasses. And if they need to know a specific type of truck, well, then they get the specific name.
That's pretty good. I like how he says that. That's the first time I've ever seen that. I'll put that right. This guy's very he's on it in some things and other things. It's opinion. It's opinions, right? It's experience. He doesn't see what I've seen.
Sometimes if you're struggling to name something, it's actually indicative that the code structure is to blame. A common anti-pattern I see is if there's a collection of functions used widely in the codebase, but it's all bundled up into a single utils class or module.
Yeah, this is that procedure. Class-oriented programming. I've been talking about the static functions, just using editing data classes. He's on it too. He's like, this is weird. No kidding. It's super strange, isn't it?
Functions used widely in the codebase, but it's all bundled up into a single utils class or module. If you're thinking of naming code utils or helper, you should think if it's really the right spot for it. Here's some code from a Node app that processes movies. There's a bunch of util functions here. Firstly, we should consider whether some of these methods...
Yeah, they all accept the movie and they do something to the movie. This is procedural. Procedure world, just like masquerading. Look, I'm object-oriented. No, you're not. You're class-oriented. Sorry.
actually make sense as a part of their respective types.
I'm gonna get people fired. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm just trying to raise the bar so we can have a little easier time moving forward. We can all talk as friends
Instead. So this code here, we can actually just move into the movie class itself. For some of these, we can instead create a class that represents a collection of movies, and that has the desired methods. And finally, some of these can be separated into other classes with descriptive names. The paging functionality can be moved into its own class.
Ooh, I don't like this very much, but let's keep going.
And we can even make this generic if we want, so that it can operate on more than just movies. And the cookie function should really just be in a cookie class. Now,
I didn't really talk about generics. It's just another way of like a general class of thing. That's all it is. Again, it's just more of the same stuff. Maybe I should do one on generics. Maybe later, bonus episodes.
we don't have anything in our utils class, so we can just delete it. You don't see a bundle of utils in standard libraries because they can all be sorted into modules.
Oh yeah, you do. It was called math. Math.add. That's all utils, buddy. So he doesn't know everything, but he's good, man. He's good. This guy's good.
That have good names. So we should do the same in our code. These few rules will help you write code that is easier to read and change.
Very good. All right. So I like that guy's stuff in general. So that's naming things. Oh, object. You keep using that word. Let's listen to Kevlin talk about. I'm not gonna butcher his the first part. You can go find out what this is all about here. Because he loves, this guy loves words. He's got the little touch of the Aspies, but at least he's been socialized properly and channels it well. And I appreciate his information. Let's keep going.
So why is all this relevant? Why am I showing you this? Because this is how a lot of people think object orientation is. A lot of people, they come to it. I'm going to say Java came along and it completely screwed up the good work that was being done in the object world. It came along and people started thinking, oh, the way we create objects is we use classes, and the classes have simple responsibilities, and these responsibilities are managers or controllers or something like that. And what we do is we just, if you want to describe your meaning, you just glue lots of words together. And if you really want to confuse people, you glue more words together. Now what's funny is that people...
Or just have a conference and we'll have set you up with a coach, and we'll get you a whole series of classes for your whole team, and we'll set you up and we'll get you set up straight.
People think, oh no, I'm going to make this more meaningful. I'm going to add more things. No. You make it less meaningful by adding more. It's diluting, okay? If I take whiskey and I put water in it, you have, well, it's still whiskey, but it's just not as strong. If I put more water in it, I'm using whiskey because I was in Edinburgh last week and there was a whiskey tasting at the conference that I was at. And if I put...
Sounds like he's still a little hungover.
more water in, does it make it stronger, more meaningful, more potent? No, it just makes it more like water. So I want you to think that next time you go and think, I've got a standard component I'm going to add to my name, and I'll just I'll extend the meaning. No, you won't. You'll dilute it. Because naming is hard.
That is a good way of thinking about it. That is a good way of thinking about it. You're going to dilute it. You're diluting the meaning by extending it. No, I'm reusing code like they told me. No.
Because naming is hard. We see things here. Thirst quencher container. Multi-but supporter is one of my favorites here. But this is an object-oriented programmer. How would an object-oriented programmer really look at this? Well, they're going to look at it completely differently. They're going to look at this and they're going to say, well, that's a door. That's a Venetian blind. That's a television.
He's talking about the Alan Kay boop style, which we're about to get into after the functional stuff.
The only thing that even remotely looks the same but doesn't quite work out in this coloring is the television remote control. It's a similar length to entertainment provider visual controller. It even uses the word control, but that's because we use that in the real world. It turns out that sometimes the whole point is to name it what it is. That's the idea. The idea of the object paradigm was to look at the model world, look at the concepts that you wanted to place in your
He added a dash here. I just want to point that out.
program and name them that way, not to kind of add, no, I can't call it that. Sometimes I see people looking at names, looking a little uncertain. Well, it's too obvious. It's too simple. I need to add things to make it sound more technical.
Oh, is that what we're doing? Oh, Bjorn, Strustrup. Are we adding more technical sounding things? Polymorphism? Liskov substitution principle? No, we're trying to make it. We're pushing sales people. You got to do the razzle dazzle, confuse them a little bit, give them a little, daze them a bit, ding ding over the head before you can hook them by the. Get on to the conference. Next year you can sell those books to solve all their development problems with the object-oriented approach. Salespeople. The countries, we all run sales. I get it. But we don't have to fall for hook, line, and sinker every single time, do we?
We end up with a style, we end up with a style that moves away from what we want to say. So, but one of my other interests is actually writing short fiction. And this is an interesting book I came across recently, Robert McKee's story. It's about screenwriting, and in it he describes a number of things, a number of techniques, a number of observations, very useful if you want to watch a film, actually, as opposed to just write one. But he talks about story, and he just makes this very simple observation. Nouns are the names of objects. Verbs, the names of actions. That really is it. To write vividly, in other words, with life and with colour, avoid generic nouns and verbs with adjectives and adverbs attached, and seek the name of the thing. This is what writers do. And when you are writing code, this is one of the things you should be doing. And now, of course, it's always going to be hard working through a second or third language. But it turns out naming's hard whatever language you use.
Yeah. Cache out validation and off by one errors. There's two things.
Naming is hard because what you're trying to do is get to the essence of something. You're actually trying to describe what it is, and that's actually surprisingly hard because you're trying to understand. If you like, code is an expression of knowledge. It's a structuring of knowledge. And you don't always know what you know. You don't know it until you try and say it, and then you realize how hard it is. That's why any paradigm is hard. A lot of people, I'm also very interested in a lot of functional approaches, and I see people wandering over functional programming, having already screwed up object-oriented programming, and they're now busy screwing up functional programming.
Well, they got to get it back on the circuit, man. The sales cycle ended on COP. Now they got to revamp it with the FP. And now we're coming. What are we coming back down to? We're gonna do compositional. What? What are we doing? No, AI is gonna solve all of our. AI will solve all of our engineering needs. Really? You think so? You don't think we haven't heard this before? No, not a couple times. No, okay.
Because they're choosing bad names. They've got all. It turns out it's hard. They're trying to identify abstractions. That does not change. The style of identification is what differs. Now, this stuff is not new. This is a great book by Ken Beck, Smalltalk Best Practice Patterns. Does anybody actually use Smalltalk in here? No, so, okay, right. This is not surprising. It is not a mainstream language anymore. In fact, it never really was a mainstream language. We just wanted to be a mainstream language.
It had potential. It was just like 2.5 years, 3 years ahead of its time. If it would have came out 3 years later and had that same push behind it probably would have. We wouldn't have to deal with the cop. The cop would be a minor figure in this, but that's the way cookie crumbles.
However, it is one of the kind of the granddaddies of object orientation. It is one of the most influential languages. And it's also a great little patterns book. It deals with very little detailed patterns as well on your coding style. And this was published in the mid-1990s, 97, I think. And Ken made a number of observations in it. So I'm talking about the naming. He said, people will be using the words you choose in their conversation for the next 20 years. This is kind of interesting because we're now at that point. We're almost at 20 years after this book was published. You want to be sure you do it right. Unfortunately, many people get all formal. Just calling it what it is isn't enough.
Exactly. He's complaining about the same thing I'm complaining about. We need to stop doing this stuff. It's already hard enough. It's already hard enough. Quit trying to keep your jobs, guys. There's other things we can do other than this flam. Hey, razzle dazzle, the stuff. Polymorphism, it's different.
They have to tack on flowery, computer sciencey, impressive sounding an ultimately meaningless word like object, thing, component, part, manager, entity, or item. Now, I want you to keep in mind,
All that cop stuff.
this book was published in 97. I actually found a draft of the book dated 1995 online. So sometimes, although I'm kind of joking and say, oh, Java came along and screwed it up, actually, no, it didn't. This was going on everywhere.
The C++. The bad ideas that were just thrown out at people, and people were expected to like apply them to their domain and just had no idea what they couldn't get out of the procedural, man. The procedural just had them by their breath. Like the procedural, it was so difficult. It was so difficult just to get the procedure working, and now you're asking them to do a paradigm shift. Come on.
My dislike of
without any academic backing, just one technical guy was like, "You should do it this way, and I'm doing it this way, and it's very efficient for what I'm doing." It was like, "Oh my god, let's do it like that." And then they're like, "Oh, it doesn't quite work the way we wanted."
The word get in front of everything. I found an article that I wrote in 1995 concerning C++, and I was already complaining about this really stupid habit people had of putting the word get in front of things.
Because it was just cops just trying to be the cop with the procedure, trying to procedure, just shoving it in there. They didn't know. It's not like these guys were getting any help anywhere. I mean, the academics seriously have fallen down on this whole thing. Seriously. Yeah, the educational system seriously fallen down. Because it's sales driven, right? We're still making money off procedural. We just can't drop it. That's not how this works. Did you just get here, Chris? Yeah.
It's just like, no, it's not get. You know, we don't get things. If you get something, you have a side effect. You know, that's what get means in English. It means to change something. It does not mean to ask a question. That's, you know, so you know this misuse of language was already happening. Okay, nothing new. It's just there's a lot more people doing it now. So this kind of style gets really popular, and this is why it's so popular. This kind of gluing together the name style. We even have websites devoted to this. Classnamer.com. You can just hit the refresh button, and it'll generate a new name for you. And I had to take a screenshot when it came up with temporary lolcat selector. I thought that's brilliant. This was such an inspiration. Jeff Foster went off and did the method version.
Yeah.
So basically, you've now got your whole program sorted for you. You've got the class namer, and you've got the method.
Oh, it's even got this different styles. Oh, Spring, shocker. It's going to be a cop style. Oh, no, I had no idea.
Namer. You can now just sit there and just like, yeah, that's a good name. Copy, paste, done. Yeah, and this is how you can generate large enterprise systems. Yeah, you don't need to be involved except as a copy and paster. So what we've actually ended up with is not object orientation. We've ended up with something called managerialism. Now,
This is a word for cop.
that's not actually a recognized term in
Neither is mine.
software development, but I stumbled across it a while ago in the dictionary. By the way, I don't just sit there reading dictionaries, but that can be interesting. Managerialism, it turns out there's a word for it. Belief in or reliance on the use of professional managers. Application of managerial techniques of business to the running of other organizations. Belief in the importance of tightly managed organizations, as opposed to individuals or groups that do not resemble an organization. In other words, all this stuff, what we end up with is a lot of objects that seem to be torn between one of two roles. Either they manage everything, they're controllers, they're called managers, they're processors, they're handlers. They're any one of these standard suffixes.
Those are all the same thing. It's all the same thing. Where you got the static methods or static functions working on some data. The data gets munged over here. It's just a place to hold data, and the names of the functions are in here. But it's object oriented, right? No, those not.
Or they're objects that just hold data. It's basically DTOs. And
this is what I've been talking about this whole time. It's like this is not object oriented. This is something else, some in between thing. Somewhat useful ideas, but not. It's not OOP.
they're just little buckets of attributes, which, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes when people have too much of this style, what they find is that they end up with a slightly peculiar way of looking at the world. They end up with some very strange object responsibilities, validators and checkers and things like that. These are not things. These are kind of made up. But I think one of my favorite...
They're the namespace for those groups of functions.
One of my favorite observations was somebody, when I was running a session on test-driven development at a conference, I had somebody come up to me afterwards and he said, Kevlin, should I have tests? You know, should I write unit tests for all of my classes? And I said, well, you'd have to write unit tests for any if you don't want to. You know, there's no should. There's no police coming around to check on your code. But if you've agreed that you're going to write things, then maybe you should consider it. They said, well, what about all those really simple classes, the ones that just have data, that just are getters and setters, should I write tests for those? Now, sometimes when people ask you questions, what you realize is they're not asking you the question they think they're asking. They're asking a different question. And I determined fairly quickly, I said, well, so your code, how much of it is getters and setters? Oh, most of the classes are just getters and setters. Okay, so then a system that is just getters and setters doesn't do much. It just sits there being getters and setters. I have some data if you want it, but you have to ask me for it. You can set it if you want, but you have to tell me to do it. But surely, who holds it all together? So I asked him, where's all the logic? And he said, oh, that's in these really big controller classes. Do you have tests for those? Oh, no, they're too difficult to test.
So typical. This is like most Android apps up until about 2015, 2014. So bad.
So basically, we have these monstrous, tightly coupled managerialist things, and then these disempowered workers who aren't actually working at all. They're just sitting there holding data. And these are too easy to test, and these are too difficult to test. So please, can you tell me I don't need to write tests? That's what he was basically saying. And we've ended up with this kind of crazy stuff. So managerialism is what most people have ended up with. So we need to kind of get in there and start, first of all, understanding the role that our object should be playing. And some of our naming habits are interesting because a name will influence the way you think about something. When you choose a name for something, you are not merely labeling something, you are actually placing a model in somebody else's head. And they will follow that model.
That's what we are doing. We are placing a model inside somebody else's head. And there's a couple paradigms. There have been two paradigms that have been fighting each other and confusing everybody. And if you know you're in the cop paradigm, all right, you're going to deal with all that stuff. But if we're going to try the boop thing, it's a whole other thing. But it looks similar enough with these tools. It's just how you use it, right? Are you going to use a set of woodworking tools to make a chair, or are we making a shed? It's that kind of stuff. We're still making stuff, but it's like what we're making and how we're making it, what we're making it for. One's going to be used as a thing to put things on. One is a thing to put things inside. It's a similar like flip.
For something, you are not merely labeling something, you are actually placing a model in somebody else's head. And they will follow that model. If you said it's a manager, then what are the boundaries on management? There are no boundaries on management. There's
no boundaries on management. Therefore, it's global, right? It can put its fingers into everything. So is there really a system there? No. The heads of people are like, well, that thing does this thing, that, because they've all talked about it, right? But that's what they call tacit knowledge. That's just in our heads, right? And we all agree on it. Let's just document it somewhere. Good luck trying to document that stuff, because that stuff's super tacit knowledge. And so the boop style is more lends itself to like codifying those things, codifying those relationships. Whereas the cop style is very standard procedural. Everything gets to touch everything because it's super convenient that way when you're writing something and have a deadline and the company's about to go under, and all I know how to do. And I haven't done much design. All I know how to do is this cop style, because the boop style, Alan Kay's, that's not real. It's like, okay, well, it kind of is, but you have to like flip it. And unfortunately, your code base has to be changed to reflect this thing, and it's not fun to switch it around, especially when you're already making money and things are somewhat working.
There's no cohesion to that concept. So when you wonder why is this class 10,000 lines long, it's because it had a bad start in life. Somebody called it manager, or they called it controller. What is in a program with control flow? What do you have? Lots of control flow. What does a controller do? Well, it controls some of it. Okay, and you suddenly discover that you end up with these anemic model objects. You end up with all your business logic.
Anemic meaning that it's just data and no methods, no functions. It's just a bag of data. So it's a place to put the data. It calls it anemic. He's like, oh, he can barely do anything. He doesn't do anything at all, basically. That's the whole idea. Silly terminology, but let's keep on.
Okay, and you suddenly discover that you end up with these anemic model objects. You end up with all your business logic hiding in the controller, and then you wonder why we can't maintain it. So here's an idea. One way, to name classes, to give each a unique name, indicative of its purpose. Unique names give you the opportunity.
Yeah, so what he's complaining about, just to be super clear, just to be really pedantic and really clear about it, he's talking about this. He's talking about manager, controller, manager, controller, adapter, manager. and they all just talk to each other. And what he's saying is this is not, and then there's like one big controller here, and these are, one big controller here, and this is all data. And it's just data, and there's no methods here and all. This thing has a bunch of methods, and there's a whole bunch of these, and they all talk to us. It's a mess. It's a mess. And trying to, like, you can write it, but trying to extend it or change it becomes a major issue. Let's keep going.
Opportunity to convey a lot of information without creating names that are long and unwieldy. Can you find a name for the thing as it is? This is exactly the right thing to do if the names are in common use. So, just to illustrate why or how we can end up with this really strong influence, I'm going to take a workshop example that I use. This workshop example is quite simple. It's a conventional book lending library, and you think, well, this is fairly straightforward. I've had people go all the way through to code and tests with this one, and you have the idea of a member of a library can loan a book copy, and they can take.
I would just call this book. I would leave this off. I would just call this book. We know it's a copy of a book. Every book is a copy of a book. So we don't really have to say book copy. I like to put at the end what it actually is. And if it's just one thing, what it actually is. So we have a member, which is, it represents some entity that's going to be loaning and lending, getting books lent and returning books. And then we have the actual loan of the book to the person. It represents that this loan. Okay, this person has this book, and then this is the book that's actually, so these are all three different entities. There we go.
Out a loan, and the loan is maybe 4 weeks or something like that. So there is some kind of relationship. A member can have many loans. I'm not worried about the numbers. And a loan is against a book copy. A book copy could be loaned and against a member. Great. Now, sometimes people look at this and they go, oh, you know what? We need to decouple this. Everybody, these are all concrete classes. Everybody seems to know everybody else. That's too much information. We need to factor out interfaces. So,
okay.
We'll have member as a concrete class. We'll have book copy as a concrete class, and we'll leave these as interfaces. So therefore, the loan now characterizes a relationship. Now we have the interesting question, what do we call these boxes? And this is where people kind of go, oh yeah, they reach for their nearest naming habit, and they don't even know they're doing it. This is the whole point about habits. Habits are invisible. You don't even know you're applying them. So there's one. Okay.
I would have chosen this one. If there's only one of these, and I have a testing version of one, and there's only one, I will do this. But if there's going to be more than one, better find it if it works.
So this is classically a Microsoftism, but it's crept into the Java world. Thank you, Eclipse. And I've solved the name clash problem, because that's how people have come at it. It's a name clash problem, that's what it is. No, it isn't. What we've ended up doing is we've simply showed a remarkable lack of imagination. Nobody likes to be told that. What we've done is we've said, I've got a member, right, I'm going to extract an interface. What are we going to call it? Oh, it's a naming problem. Just put an I on front of it.
So do you see how this software development really isn't this technical thing? It's starting to not become that at all. Now it's this like human thing, naming stuff so other humans can understand what they are, so we can transfer these models efficiently, and we can work efficiently so people aren't confused. This is it. This is the work. It's creative as hell.
Okay. Now, there's a subtle thing here. You don't know you're doing this, but there's an alignment. You look for things that are similar. You match them up. Without realizing it, what you've got there is a vertical alignment. You're grouping things like this. You are saying members and I members, book copies and I book copies. That's how to think about this model. And then there's a loan that glues it all together. No, it's completely the wrong way to look at it. Sometimes people will package these together. They'll package a concrete class together with the interface, which kind of misses the point of the interface. The correct way to look at it is like this.
Yeah, I mean, this is how I imagine it, right? This is how I imagine it. And I do keep the test next to the interface, just in the production code. So I do it. Just so the test is right there, and every time I go to the production code, I'm gonna see the test right next to it. So it's always reminding me, hey, you remember me? The test that's gonna keep all this stuff straight and working as you go muck with everything. Yeah, you can't let me go for too long because I'm right here. I'm not in some other file someplace else. I'm right here, right next to the interface.
view.
That's just, I mean, because I've had the bad habit of like forgetting to go update the test and, oh, we can let it go. And all of a sudden all the tests are commented out. There's no tests anymore. What are you doing?
Alone defines a relationship between two kinds of object. There are two implementations that we can plug in, but you know what? They're not important. How do I know they're important? Because they're down here. I can take them away and replace them with mocks or or a new version.
A mock is just a in-place dummy test dummy where you can pass values without actually hitting any real databases or anything like that. It's like a fake implementation. That's all that is.
They're plug-in. The most important thing happening in the diagram is not left-right, like that. The most important thing is the fact that alone is a relationship between two kinds of things. What is that relationship? It's a role relationship. What is the role that thing plays? Is that actually a member? Is that actually a book copy? What is the role that it plays? What is the part that it plays in this relationship? What you're actually trying to do...
Beautiful. How he just led up to that was just really well done. He's actually, he's a pro. So
is explore a relationship. Now, this is one of the ironic problems of object orientation, is people get obsessed with the object. Actually, most things in object orientation are about the relationship between the objects. What is that relationship? How do we talk about it? So, there's this idea, a person or a thing's function. Is that thing a member? Is it actually functioning as a member? A member has a name. A member has an address. A book copy has an ISBN. It has a title. Are these things actually important as part of that relationship? It turns out they're not. Now, the strongest one is on the left, borrower. Borrower is someone or something that borrows. It could be a member, perhaps it could be another library, perhaps, it doesn't really matter. A borrower is not something that necessarily has an address or any of these other details. The point of view is that a loan is against a borrower, and this is where unfortunately we end up kind of with loan item, even though we don't want item, because loanable, maybe that's okay, but there is a little bit too much adding able on the end of things. And borrowable is not, it's hard to say in English even when you're sober, it doesn't really quite fit. So on the right hand side, I'm not too attached to that name, but it's a start. Because what you've said is it's nothing to do with book copies. A loan is an arrangement between a borrower and an item that is loaned.
Yeah, so he's having the abstract general idea of someone who would borrow something. Like this might be a member, might be another library. It might be a store. It might be some special event thing. It might, there's all kinds of things that could be somebody that borrows, and this could be a thing borrowed, right? Like a library. What do they call it? A library resource. How's that? It could be a tape. It could be a map. It could be a book. It could be a CD. It could be some piece of equipment, right? A loanable item. An item that could be loaned. A library resource to be. That would be like the generic thing. What is it? You have to go to the library people and go, what do you call all these things? Is there a group thing? This is a library resource. They'll have some name like that.
That is what a loan is, and you'll notice that horizontal alignment. You've described the relationship. Whereas normally people say, I've got a concrete glass, let's pull off all the methods, and they focus on the problem in the wrong way. Now, here's the thing. This whole naming habit of putting eyes in front of things that people sometimes do, really, we've got a thing called interface. It's a big clue in the language, and so therefore I'm also going to say, if you ever call a class abstract something, I will find you. Because I know that it's abstract. How? Well, there are a number of little clues, like the keyword abstract. There's also the fact that it won't compile if you try and instantiate an abstract class. Why won't this compile? Because it's abstract. You're trying to create new of abstract thing. That's
a new general idea. We already talked about this.
Not allowed. And so therefore what you've done is, unfortunately, without realizing it, is you've missed a really good opportunity to name what it is. You've just said, here's information I already have. I'm going to tell the reader just in case they're really stupid. I mean, maybe I should put the word class in just to be really helpful. And all my methods will be called something like a method. Just to make sure that you know that it's a method that you're calling. Maybe I should label all my variables variable as well, just to be sure.
He's being kind of a dick right now.
Because people might get confused. So, no, just go with it, okay? If you're struggling, and that's the thing we do, we don't realize we're doing it, we reach for a naming habit. Oh yeah, here's a space, I'll fill it. Okay, so let me pick another example from a different workshop.
Okay, I'm going to let you watch the rest of that because it is important to listen to the whole thing. We're at 40 minutes in. Do I want to say big design fan? Design patterns. You know what? I might leave design patterns to the next one because, yeah, that's the last one. The last COP thing is this design pattern stuff. This threw me for a loop the first time I saw it. I was like, "What are you guys talking about? You have to learn all these different things. This is nuts. This is barely useful." I'm Chris. Give me a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. We're going to finish up next video with COP, and we're going to be moving on to functional programming, which is way more exciting than all this cop stuff.